Hello everyone, we have done volume 1 to volume 4, also understood the various advanced outlines and the commonly used phrases, did the practice of the same in members only videos, and today we will understand the phrases related to the word, effect and essential. We'll do the practice of the same and then we'll continue with the dictation of transcription number 89, 90 and 91. The speed will be 90 words per minute and you will get the timestamps in the description. These are the phrases. First, I'm going to read them. Then you have to practice the same and then get ready for the dictation. And in members only videos, we are practicing the phrases in various other ways also, so that we will get the quickness while writing them with sentences with paragraph. So I'm reading these phrases. Came into effect, psychological effect, retrospective effect, side effect, take effect, take effect from the, took effect from, to this effect, to that effect, with effect from, or with effect from the, with immediate effect, with retrospective effect. Absolutely essential, essential services, essential articles, essential steps, essential supplies, Essential Commodities Act. It is essential, it is also essential, it is absolutely essential, most essential, and very essential. Some phrases will be having more than one outline. I suggest choose the shortest form. Practice the same and get ready everyone for the dictation. Came into effect, psychological effect, retrospective effect, side effect, take effect, take effect from the, took effect from, to this effect, to that effect, with effect from the, with immediate effect, with retrospective effect, absolutely essential, essential services, essential articles, essential steps, essential supplies, essential commodities, Essential Commodities Act. It is essential, it is also essential, it is absolutely essential, most essential, very essential. Now translate and check. Get ready for the dictation of transcription number 89. The honorable members who have spoken before said that the small growers get the correct price from the board. This is not so. The entire bulk of the profits they make in the home market and in the foreign market is kept by the bigger growers who dominate this coffee board. The price they get is more than what they pay to the small growers. That is the complaint of the small growers. So, it is not correct to say that the profits this board makes are equally distributed to the small growers. Hence, the conflict between the big growers and the small growers is increasing. Therefore, it is necessary on the part of the government to do justice to the small growers. The government thinks that by taking powers for nominating the president of the board, it is able to do justice to the small growers. The number of the small growers is 34,000, while the number of the big growers is 590. Most of the seats reserved for the growers in the last board were monopolized by the big growers. The majority of the seats were held by the big growers, and the number of seats the small growers got was very meager. It was not more than four, if my recollection is correct. What the government should have done was to give equal representation to the small growers. They should have asked the growers to return their representatives, or to give a panel of names from which government could have chosen some. The choice of the representatives should have been left to the respective organizations. If there was no organization for the small growers, government should have asked them to organize one separately and then send in their representatives. Our friends said that the representatives of the small growers were there on the existing board. It is true, but I know the practice of these big growers or big industrialists. Having given membership to the smaller fry on their organizations, they don't allow them to express themselves. The chairman or the man who holds sway of the board sees to it that all the members agree to what he dictates. That is the practice in these associations. We know that. So it is better to have a separate organization for the small growers and ask them to submit their panel of names to represent them on the board. Representation on the board should not be governed by the number of acres owned and the amount of capital invested, but by the number of the growers. If this principle is adopted, the bigger growers will not be able to run away with what they want. In this connection, I would also say that instead of nominating the president, the government should do this. The government should ask the respective organizations of the big growers, the small growers, labor, and the consumers to send in the names of their representatives and then include members of parliament. Then the board constituted in this way should be asked to elect its chairman. If this procedure is adopted, then the government can see that no big grower is elected to the chairmanship. In that case, only a man who can command a majority in the board will be elected, and that man will see to it that justice is done to all the interests concerned. But here, the government, in the name of taking over control of the industry, wants to bureaucratize the whole industry. I don't think that by bureaucratizing the board, the government will be able in any way to help the industry to develop or to bring about better working conditions for the labor. One member in the select committee said that no representation should be given to labor. That is the attitude of the growers. That is the attitude generally of all employers in this country. But is it just on their part to deny representation to labor as well as to the consumers? Certainly, the rights of these people should be recognized, but personally, I don't think that by merely giving representation to labor on the board, the government can do justice to labor. It is true that the minister in the select committee, as well as in his reply to the debate in the other house, said that the working conditions of labor were very pitiable and deplorable and should be improved. Sir, there was also a petition sent to the Lok Sabha by the employees of the coffee house recommending to the house that their petition should be considered. The employers deny the rights of the workers and they say that they have made all efforts to develop the industry in all these 13 years. At what cost? It is at the cost of the workers by paying them low wages. They have made a huge profit, which is expressed in the reply of Mr. Redcliffe to a question of the Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry that he had been distributing a dividend of 13.5% in 1 year. In 1 year, he had given 20% dividend, in another year 27%, and in yet another year he gave 19% to his shareholders. At the same time, this big dividend is after deducting the expenses including depreciation, taxation, reserve fund, and reserve fund to capital invested. Apart from all these, they have made a net profit so as to distribute an average dividend at 13.5%. Can anybody imagine that such an industry should be allowed to distribute this high dividend at the cost of the poor labor who actually produced this profit? Certainly at the cost of the poor labor and the people they have got this profit. The coffee houses are getting coffee at the rate of rupees 210 per kilo. At the same time, how do they sell coffee there? Stop, translate and check. Get ready for the another one. Transcription number 90. Now, there is another aspect of the rubber industry, namely the rubber producing industry, which has been entirely left out of the consideration of this bill, that is the rubber manufacturing industry. My honorable friend Mr. R.P. Sinha has rightly pointed out that aspect. We find that Indian rubber production has been consumed by the rubber manufacturing industry in India. So, here is the question of increasing Indian production. As with the tea trade, the question is of export. As yet, the structure of the tea trade and the trends of the tea trade are such that it is mainly dependent on export, and whenever there is any loss of export market, there is a hue and cry of a crisis. But in the case of the rubber industry, all the rubber produced in India is consumed by the rubber manufacturing industry in India. Rubber is a very important commodity, and this industry should also be developed here. There is a deficit in Indian production. So the government thinks of allowing import of rubber. If the production of rubber is increased by 27,000 tons a year, that will be consumed in India. That is all very true. So, my point is that in connection with the development of the rubber industry, we cannot leave the rubber manufacturing industry out of our consideration. These are closely connected with one another. Coming to the question of the rubber manufacturing industry, my friend Mr. R.P. Sinha has rightly pointed out that it is also dominated mainly by foreign companies. The rubber manufacturing industry in India produces various types of rubber goods from tires to waterproofs and other rubber materials. They produce tires and tubes, cables, general mechanical goods, including roofing, footwear, and so on. But the predominant position in the rubber manufacturing industry is occupied by Messrs. Dunlop Rubber Company, Messrs. Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, Bata India, etc. And from the figures which have been given in the report of the Indian Tariff Board, it is seen that the average total consumption of rubber is distributed among a large number of small industries. Here also the question that arises is this: how should we treat these concerns, these big, gigantic concerns? Sir, I have not studied the condition of labor in these industries of Messrs. Dunlop, Firestone, and Goodyear Company. Therefore, just now I am not in a position to give you the picture of their condition. But the question is that from the price of rubber in India in relation to the world price of rubber, these people are mostly benefiting. It is true that prices cannot be fixed in such a way that the big concerns will pay one price for the rubber and the small concerns will pay another price for rubber. Here also, the main question that comes is this: if we want to develop the small units, the question arises of putting some check on the profits made. These big foreign concerns must go. It is they who are taking all the advantage of the present position in India. About that aspect, I find that there has been no mention in the bill and there was no indication in the speech of the Honorable Minister for Commerce. Then, lastly, I would like to say that here also the government has taken the power to appoint the chairman and is going to reconstitute the board. The same remarks which I made in connection with the chairman of the coffee board are valid here. If it is the intention of the government to break the domination of the foreign rubber growers or big rubber growers in the rubber board, I think it will be circulated to honorable members later on. Let there not be any foreign representation on the board. If the government is not prepared to accept that suggestion, then also it can take certain other minimum steps. It can increase the representation of small growers. It can increase the representation of labor. The representation of small growers has been increased by one, but the representation of labor should be increased. I do not suggest the number now. In this manner, if the government thinks that the reconstitution of the rubber board is essentially necessary in order to exercise its power for the development of the rubber industry, then the reconstitution should be on proper lines, not simply by having a nominated chairman, not simply by indulging in eyewash activities. The government should do everything to check the big foreign interests and big growers. Mr. Vice Chairman, as has been pointed out, we have a series of similar bills. Rubber is a cash crop, and therefore, I think the government should be very careful to see that in fixing the price of rubber, the price of the manufactured articles is borne in mind. The honorable member who preceded me has pointed out that the rubber manufacturers are mostly foreign firms, and the figures that he has given are really staggering. It has been pointed out that during the last 10 or 12 years, the profits distributed are 350%. That means the original 1 crore of rupees have received 3.5 crores of rupees as profit. It has also been pointed out that 1 crore of rupees have become 2 crores of rupees by means of bonus shares, and the market price of the shares of 2 crores of rupees is nearly 7 crores of rupees. That means that the original 1 crore of rupees become 10 crores of rupees in our country. The foreigners are multiplying their profits. They are expanding their industries and getting a strong hold on our economy. The honorable members of this house give protection. They want Indian industries to develop, but the advantage of this protection is taken by the foreigners. They set up factories in our country, and if at all some money is brought from outside, it multiplies tenfold. Stop, translate, and check. Get ready for the dictation of transcription number 91. Mr. Vice Chairman, I accept the principle of the separation of the railway finance from the general finance. I also accept the desirability of this arrangement. It is not only a convenient arrangement, but it is based on sound principles and is conducive to the better administration of the railways. I also agree that the contribution of the railways to the general revenues should be in the shape of fixed dividends, but I cannot agree that the dividend should be fixed at 4%, and that is the crux of the whole report. As a matter of fact, the committee was instituted only to go into that matter whether the dividend payable at the present time, that is 4%, was reasonable or not, and whether this arrangement should continue. When I say that I do not agree to the rate of dividend, I wish to submit that enough material has not been placed in our hands to judge whether the dividend which is being fixed is fixed on some sound basis or not. The committee has not examined certain vital matters concerning the administration of the railways, and what I find is that the whole arrangement is very superficial. It appears to me that the railway administration and the finance administration came to an agreement, and the committee did not find it necessary because of the agreement between the two ministries to examine and go into the vital matters which affect this issue. It is not clear how this dividend, if fixed at 4%, is going to react on the working of the railways, and particularly on the future development of the railways, and also on the present structure of the fares and freights. This question has not at all been examined, and we do not know what reaction it is likely to have. These are very vital matters, and I think that they need a thorough examination before we can come to correct conclusion in this matter. As we know, there is a pressing demand for reduction in the railway fares, particularly for third class passengers. This demand has been made on the floor of this house, and I think there is great justification behind this demand, and more particularly now when we find that the prices of agricultural goods have gone down, we will have to take into consideration the question whether the rural population, who will get much lesser return for their products, now will be able to pay the same fares and freights. I also wish to draw your attention to the fact that the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce had submitted a memorandum to the Honorable the Railway Minister, asking him for an examination and revision of the freight structure. I do not know what the position today is, and unless and until we are enlightened about that, unless and until we know where we stand in relation to freights and fares, we are not in a position to take any decision whether the rate of dividend should be 4% or not. I should like to ask the Honorable the Railway Minister whether, in view of this strong demand made by the people through their representatives in both the Houses of Parliament, and in view of the changing economy with which we are faced, he can give us an assurance that he will be able to discharge his obligations and responsibilities and commitments that he will be able to pay a dividend of 4%, and yet he will be able to reduce the freight and fare rates. That is the basic thing. Another important factor which has to be taken into consideration is the development schemes. I wish to submit that there is no new approach in this matter. I find that we are going about in this matter in the same frigid manner, and the aspirations of the people have not at all been taken into consideration. The Honorable Railway Minister will remember that during the budget speeches made on the floor of this house as well as in the other house, there have been incessant demands for the development of the railways. I don't know what he thinks about it and how he thinks that after paying this dividend at 4%, he will be able to meet that demand, and he will be able to find a way for the railways to expand their economy as they think it proper, as would meet the demands and aspirations of the people. In this connection, I wish to invite your particular attention to the facts. I will be happy if he could pay even a larger percentage, but the fact is that we must be sure that the railways are, in the present circumstances, in a position to do so and yet discharge their responsibilities and obligations and satisfy the needs and demands of the people, which are legitimate and justified. Now, when we fix the dividend at 4%, what happens is that we also fix that of those projects which are to be considered as remunerative at 5%, because the railways want a margin of 1%. What actually happens is that when we fix it at such a high level, because of this percentage, we find that not many new projects are really taken up, and we have been very seriously disappointed in this matter. I therefore think that in the present circumstances, the railways cannot afford to pay a dividend of 4%. May I ask the railway minister whether it is not a fact that even he has not been able to contribute fully, or even he will fall short by about rupees 60 crores in his contribution towards the plan out of the rupees 400 crores that the railways have to contribute. I find from his speech that they are faced with a net shortfall of about rupees 62 crores. Stop, translate and check. Thank you.